Stand by. Brett, good?
Yep.
And action.
Well, good day. Welcome to our first episode of BeKinetic. Must be honest, I love the word kinetic because it is such a loaded word. It talks about energy, it talks about movement, going forward, it talks about being efficacious, which simply means making things happen. And I believe that all of us want to be leaders who are going forward, who are becoming more effective, who are being more passionate, more dynamic. And so we're going to have numerous sessions where we're going to be looking at how can we be more kinetic. The first topic that I'd like to share, just simply because I am passionate about it, is how to create a resilient safety culture. Now, I've got to share a great story with you. Several years ago, I was in New York and had such a great experience. And I had the privilege of going to see the show Chicago. Sounds so weird, being in New York watching Chicago. And after the production, I was going back to my hotel, and as I was standing at the entrance of the train station, I noticed this gentleman was walking down to get on board, and as he was walking down, the door started to close. And then I saw how he started to run in this frantic motion of trying to make the train. It didn't take a genius to realize that the distance he had to go and the speed that the doors was closing, that he wasn't going to make it. Now, I know that the doors are sensitized, so as they started to close, I simply just put out my hand, it touched my hand and opened as it should have. This allowed him to catch the train, and as we were going down the railway track, we just started talking. He was so grateful and very expressive, going, "Oh, thank you, I really, really appreciate it." Now, I've had the privilege of living in Seattle for a year, so I kind of got a feel of the average excitement of the typical American, and I realized that his enthusiasm was beyond the normal person. And I realized that this guy has most probably got 2 beers in his system. He was really friendly. And in the course of going down the tracks, he eventually asked me where I was staying. And I was saying, I'm going to this hotel, and it was my last night in New York. And he said, no, I can't go back to the hotel. We need to go out and have a beer at one of the local pubs. And I go, well, why not? It is my last night, may as well have an experience. And eventually we get off at his station and we start looking for his car. And in the process of looking for his car, we're up and down. As I ask him, I said, listen, what type of car do you have? And he can't remember. Then it dawns upon me, this guy doesn't have 2 beers in his system. He's probably got about 12 or 15. And to make things worse, as we're looking for his car, is we find a bottle store. Now, many things in New York are open 24 hours a day, and this bottle store happened to be open, and we're talking about it's 11:30 at night, and so we go into the bottle store, and he goes to the back and he gets himself a beer, and as he's walking to the counter, he starts to open it. Immediately, the cashier sees him and becomes extremely animated and literally screams at him and says, "Close that bottle because you're not allowed to drink in public in New York." And for me, it was such an interesting experience to see how animated this cashier became and insistent that he wasn't allowed to open it in his store. Now, in New York, they typically use these brown paper bags as they've moved away from plastic bags, as we do in South Africa because of environmental reasons. So when he paid for it, he put it back into the bag, and he insisted that this gentleman walked out with it concealed. Realizing that this guy is intoxicated, I said, with all respect, I don't feel it's safe that we drive. And he said, no, but we still got to go out. So he phoned a taxi. The taxi eventually pulls up, and we get into the taxi. And true as Bob, what he does is he pulls out the beer and he starts to open it. The taxi driver sees it and immediately pulls to the side of the road and says, "Sir, with all respect, you either need to get out of my taxi or put the beer away because you're not allowed to drink in public in New York." And it was a profound experience because literally within a 20-minute period I was very aware that you're not allowed to drink in public in New York. And when I landed at JFK, there was no sort of introduction, there was no test, there was no, this is what we do here. But after that experience, I knew for a fact you're not allowed to drink in public in New York. Now, I believe that the mayor has a role in establishing the culture of no drinking allowed. I believe that the police force have a role to play. But what really excited me in this situation is that the people, the average citizen, was enforcing this type of thinking. And I think when it comes to safety, obviously the GM, the CEO, the safety officers, the she-reps, they all have a role in enforcing this culture. But you know you are winning. You know you have a resilient safety culture is when the average worker is saying, you know what, we do not drink in public in New York. Now obviously in a safety culture, we're not talking about alcohol, but there are other issues saying, you know what, in our operation is we wear our hard hat. Is we keep to the speed limit. We wear our safety belts. We use our harness when climbing at heights. And there's something of this culture, and it's being driven right from the top to the people at the bottom. And so when we look at a safety culture, is that there's certain levels of maturity. And I think the first one really isn't where we want to be, where people are outright resistant to safety. And you hear it in comments like this. When you say, we need to have a safety topic, there's something of this, do we really need to do this? Or this is a waste of time. When you have a safety manager come in and say, we would like to do a new initiative, or here's a new idea, and the guys respond, instead of thank you, let's embrace it, how can we apply this to safety? There's something of this, it's going to affect our production and it's going to cost too much. And we can see that these people are outright resistant and negative towards safety. We definitely don't want those people within our company. Then the second type of person is those that are compliant in public. And these are interesting people, because what we see is they typically don't wear their PPE, they typically are taking shortcuts, and tell a safety manager, and tell the DMR, and tell someone from the Department of Labor, and tell the safety manager arrives on site, and then it's interesting to see how quickly they react. And I see it all the time, where someone will have their safety glasses will be on the top of their head, and that their dust mask normally sits over here. And as soon as that person arrives on site, then very quickly the dust mask goes here and the safety glasses go in the appropriate place. And as soon as that person disappears, then what happens is the safety glasses goes up again and the dust mask goes down. And it's really unfortunate that these people only follow the safety rules and regulations, not because it's going to keep them safe, but because they want to, well, they're only doing it because it complies. The third level, and this is really where we want to be, is now we're at a place is that we are complying because it's an internal value. It's something that we have embraced. It's our lifestyle. We're not doing it to please someone else. We're doing it because it's important to us. We want to go home safely. It's something that we have embraced. I'm going to share a story with you that, must be honest, I'm a little bit embarrassed about, but I think it will drive home the point. Is several years ago, when I was just being exposed to safety for the first time, is I was invited to do a team building event at Anglo American. And I really don't like being late. And anyway, I was behind schedule, and I really wanted to be at the site on time. And the person who invited me had left before, but because I don't want to be late, I actually arrived earlier than he did. So he asked me, he said, how did you get here so quickly? And something with an attitude. I was proud. I was going, well, I drove 160, 170 k's an hour. Instead of him joking with me, he was disappointed. And he asked me a question that still troubles me today. He said, if I was in an incident at 160 k's an hour, what more than likely would happen? And at that excessive speed, I'm more than likely going to die. And then he asked me such a pertinent question. He said, if I am in an incident at 160 and I die, who will raise my kids? And it struck me. I was totally shocked because I literally had never thought about it. I was reckless and thought it was acceptable. I was proud about it. And for that moment, it dawned upon me going, that is not the wisest decision. I have a habit, I have a lifestyle that is putting myself in harm's way that would have such a detriment if I was killed. And from then onwards, I can honestly say, and that was 7 years ago, I have never done excessive speed. I don't worry about the speed cops that are hiding behind the bush. I don't care about the cameras because I don't do it for them anymore. They can regulate me all they want because when I see them, I'm not worried because I know that I'm doing the correct speed. Not because I'm going to get into trouble, but because I want to be a responsible driver and get home safely because I love my kids and I want to raise them. The third area is when we start to come to a place that it's not only that I care about my own safety, but now I care about the safety of those around me. Now you'd think that this would actually be the easiest stage to go to, but surprisingly, in most situations, it's actually the hardest. Because you'd think that when you'd walk up to a friend or a colleague and say, listen, my friend, would you mind putting on your hard hat? Or, listen, I see you taking a shortcut here. Maybe we need to reconsider it. You'd think that the response would be, oh, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. I really appreciate it. But what we find is time and time again is instead of embracing that encouragement is that people actually get a bit of an attitude and they would respond something like this. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Do you think you are better than me? And they actually respond in a very negative way. So moving from private compliance to collaboration is a very difficult step, because as soon as we start saying to people, you may not drink in public in New York. Now, obviously in safety, that's a different scenario, but there's something of that embrace is that people don't always take it so well. And so it is one of our hardest areas to break into, but when we do, that is when we're winning, where it's going beyond just an individual effort to now a collective, and from there we just slip right into the last phase, which is resilience. That is just our culture. It's everyone has embraced. It's we talk about safety, we think about safety, we just do safety without it being driven, without it being forced upon everyone. It's just an inbred value. And what is great when we get to resilience is when people join our companies, is they almost don't need to go through an induction. Now obviously they do need to, but they just pick up on the vibe, on the attitude, on the working habits of everyone around them, and they just slip right in and they embrace this type of approach to working safely. For the next session is we're going to look at what drives human behavior. Because I think many of us are sitting with the frustration is that we would like to move our people from this resistant attitude to a private compliance to then this collaboration spirit, but we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to influence people's attitudes and behaviors towards safety. And so we're going to take a couple of moments to explore what drives people's behavior and how can we influence that. Until then, be kinetic. Be moving towards that which you're looking for. I can't wait to see you next time. Have a great day further.
All right, cut.
Great stuff, guys.